that they have black people and white poor people and red poor people and Puerto Rican poor people and Latin American Puerto Rican people of poor people of all descents. They have them caught up in movements based on racism when the Black Panther Party stood up and said that we don't care what anybody says. We don't think you fight fire with fire best, we think you fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight with solidarity. We said we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. We stood up and said we're not going to fight reactionary pigs and reactionary state attorneys like this and reactionary state attorneys like Hanrahan with any other reactions on our part. We're going to fight their reactions where all of us people are getting together and have an international proletarian revolution. Right on. Right on. And that's saying all power to the people. Right on. That's saying that no matter what color you are, there's only two classes. And that's saying there's a class over here and there's a class over there. And the reason that this class over here has never did anything to get this class off its back because this is lower, this is upper. This is the oppressed, this is the oppressor. This is the exploited, this is the exploiter. And these people in this class have divided themselves. They say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black people. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly and I hate Indians. So we fight amongst each other. And you've heard the testimony of pigs here. You got pigs of all colors, you know that. You got pigs that are white, you got pigs that are black, you even got pigs that are black and white. Propagating the same type of madness that this buffoon Hanrahan would be propagating if he were here himself. And why? Because they want to keep you to believing that I'm your enemy, and that everybody else that's black and that wears a lot of hair on his head and hair on his face, they want to keep you thinking that he's your enemy. Why? Because if ever you would disregard him and overlook him just for a minute and throw away that question of racism and started to dealing with a little logic, then there would be no one else you could attack other than Hanrahan, other than Davy, and other than Tricky Dicky Nixon. If you make the right decision, then the oppressed people of the world can get complete satisfaction. I know you return a verdict of not guilty. Thank you. What makes them mad about it? What makes them mad about it?
All right, that was Fred Hampton. I got a message a few days ago about the opportunity to speak with Fred Hampton's lawyers that handled his case against the state after he was killed. And for those that don't know, the gentleman that you heard speaking right there was the enigmatic, charismatic Fred Hampton, probably one of the best organizers the Black Panther Party had, was killed at the young age of 21. And new information has come out that shows that hit was a hit, and it was ordered by J. Edgar Hoover. To talk about this more, first of all, let me bring on my co-host, my homie, my pal, Pascal Robert.
Brother Jason Miles, how are you? Look forward to the show.
I'm excited. So I'm not even gonna just, I do have to, they have some serious resumes. First, Brother Flint Taylor is a founding member of the People's Law Office in Chicago. He was, together with Jeff Haas, who's also on the show today, a lead lawyer for Landmark Fred Hampton and Mark Clark's civil case. He has represented numerous police torture survivors during the past 33 years. He was one of the lawyers involved in the struggle for reparations and has chronicled the decades-long fight against Chicago police violence and torture in his book, The Torture Machine, Racism and Police Violence in Chicago, which came out on Haymarket Books in 2019. And also we have Brother Jeff Haas, a founding partner, also the People's Law Office. With Flint Taylor, was a lead lawyer in that Fred Hampton case, and was one of the main lawyers for the 17 Pontiac brothers wrongful charge, but acquitted in the capital murder trial for the Pontiac Prison Rebellion in 1978. Jeff also worked with other PLO lawyers representing the victims of the Chicago Police Department torturer John Burge. Most recently, Jeff provided legal support and represented water protectors at Standing Rock. So we got a lot to talk about. Please welcome Mr. Jeffrey Haas and Flint Taylor.
You ever work at the United Center? That's a Chicago inside joke, right?
Oh, I know the United Center. I know. Part of this show started for me doing music tours, so I've actually been in several arenas, and that was one of them that I've been in.
Okay.
So, gentlemen, thank you for taking some time to talk to us this evening. Truly appreciate it. Pascal and I have read your article in Truth Out. I'm going to be putting a link up to that shortly, so people can see that as well. And it sent me down a rabbit hole of Fred Hampton videos on YouTube, which there's a good amount of videos for the short time that he was alive. There's some good footage, and whew, what a powerful speaker and organizer this man was, that's saying things in 1968 that still is extremely valuable today. Pascal, did you want to?
No, I mean, for me, just looking back at speeches from Fred Hampton, as I told the gentleman earlier, as someone who was a student and was mentored by Bruce Dixon, it just brings back, the long conversations I had with Bruce about his time in the Chicago Black Panther Party, coming up, and dealing with, the police and the whole kind of apparatus that existed in Chicago around repressing them and repressing their movement. And it just makes me realize that young people at such an age made the connection between not only racism, capitalism, imperialism, and were able to understand that their position in the world was connected to all of what Martin Luther King called the three evils, and that they they literally put their lives on the line and faced the state, the ultimate punishment of the state, which is with their lives, to try to change the society. So, I, for me, would not only like to hear from you, esteemed gentlemen, in terms of the current information and details you have that demonstrate the role of the FBI and federal intelligence in the Fred Hampton case, but as individuals who lived through that era, what exactly are the lessons you would have for the young activist generation that we see today, coming out today, trying to challenge those same types of evils from what you saw in the era of the late 60s, early 70s? What lessons do you think they should be taking to heart?
Well, I'll start if that's okay, and then sort of beginning it personally, and also the effect Fred had on us in many ways. I was a lawyer, and Fred was a law student in Chicago in 1967 and 8 and 9. There was a lot going on in Chicago. King had come there to attempt to desegregate the city. The Democratic Convention was there. SDS was there. The Young Lords had started. So everything was pretty much in political upheaval. And I was working at Legal Aid, where we couldn't do criminal cases. And so Fred came to somebody I knew and said, look, we're getting busted every time we try to sell a newspaper or step outside our office. We need a people's law office to help us, to represent us. And so that was really the spark that caused Dennis and me and then Flint and about 6 of us to get together and decide on our career that we were going to be lawyers for the movement. And actually, it was when I heard Fred speak when he came out of jail, when he said, everybody stand up and say, I am a revolutionary. And I thought, well, I'm a lawyer for the movement. I'm not of the movement. But by the time he said that 6 times and we were all shouting, I was shouting, I'm a revolutionary just like everyone else. So it's just that personal impact he had on me. Flint was also there on the creation of a law office. And I think he just energized people around him, made us believe in the movement. he was a remarkable person. Even in high school, he had led demonstrations because black girls weren't allowed to be homecoming queens and to get more black teachers and administrators. He led a march to get a recreation center for black people. He would go to church and listen to the cadence of the ministers, and he learned, actually had overcome a speech defect and practiced the speeches of Dr. King and Malcolm X. And that way, when he introduced Stokely Carmichael in Chicago, when he was there, Stokely and people from SNCC said, well, who is this guy? And so when they started a Panther chapter, they said, this is the person we want to be the chairman. And so Fred had that. He'd grown the NAACP suburban chapter when they started the Panthers. And he just had an amazing ability to reach people, to reach welfare mothers, to reach college students, to reach Appalachian whites and Hispanic young lords who were part of the street gang that had fought gentrification. So he was a tremendously dynamic person. He also read a lot. And as was shown in the clip, he understood, he connected socialism, he connected the struggles. He didn't believe in black capitalism. And he connected the struggle with the struggle of the Vietnamese people and the international proletariat struggle and the class struggle. So Fred combined all those things, and then he became the leader of the Panthers, which grew tremendously under his leadership and the programs that they had and the selling of newspapers. And so I'm going to just start there and let Flint take over with how you remember Fred and why we did what we did.
Yeah, well, I was a 23-year-old law student, didn't have a lot of worldly experience, was out here at Northwestern coming from the East, and I connected up with Jeff and other lawyers, and we started the People's Law Office in August of 1969, and we started to have a crash education, a crash course in revolutionary politics, on the ground, the movement, representing people, Panthers, Fred Hampton, young lords, others who were in struggle, who were the victims and the targets of police repression. And Fred Hampton was 21 years old. I met him. As Jeff said, we heard him in the church in August of '69 when he came out of jail after he'd been released on a trumped up robbery charge. And we had worked to get him out of jail on appeal bond. And he was electric. And at that church rap that he gave. And then I had him come to Northwestern. The bastion at that time of white, male, rich law students. And he came and the whole school turned out, and he was able to galvanize those law students for a moment at least in a similar way he did to the community in the church in August. He was that kind of leader. He was that kind of dynamic person. The clip that you showed was in a mock trial. He was acting as his own lawyer in a mock trial in Maywood. And it was his closing argument that he was given to that jury. You saw one of the white guys there on the jury smoking a cigarette. Of course, they acquitted him, unlike the jury that found him guilty of stealing $71 of ice cream and distributing it to the young kids in Maywood. So Fred came to Northwestern in October, and 2 months later, I was standing in his blood at the apartment 2337 West Monroe Street on December 4th, as we mobilized from the office, all of the people who worked there, and the Panthers, and community folks and cameramen and photographers to deal with the crime scene that had happened just hours before the assassination of Fred Hampton and the murder of Mark Clark.
Fascinating. So the question I would ask is that at what point did you gentlemen become pretty secure in your analysis that the state, at least the state, had orchestrated some type of conspiracy to cause the death of Fred Hampton? When did that become your suspicion early on in the case?
I guess the question is how. I woke up on the morning of December 4th and was told by my law partner that Fred had been murdered by a police raid. And while he and Flint and other people went to the apartment, I went to the jail with Fred's fiance, 8 months pregnant with Fred Jr., who was born posthumously, was there in her nightgown. And so she said to me, the police came in firing. And when they got back to our bedroom, they pulled me out of the bedroom, and I heard one policeman go in, and these were undercover cops. I heard one pig say, is he dead yet? And I heard 2 shots. And then she said, I heard he's good and dead now. So that was an eyewitness account. On the way from there, I heard Hanrahan saying that the Panthers had opened fire on these innocent police serving a warrant, unsuspecting, and that the Panthers kept shooting and Fred Hampton was shooting at people himself. So I had those obviously different stories from the get-go. But as the evidence gathered, what Deborah told me, including that there were 2 close parallel bullet hole wounds in Fred's head, and then what Flint found at the apartment made us realize that this was a shoot-in, not a shootout, and that really the Panthers were the victims. And then Flint can kind of tell you, at least at an early stage, we realized that this was a raid that intended to attack and kill Panthers. What we learned, we'll talk about later, is how high and who was involved in this conspiracy.
Right. I think that it depends on how you define the state. Obviously, right from Jump Street, we understood that the state, in the form of the police and the state's attorney's office, had murdered Fred. That they had come to maim and murder, as Bobby Rush has said. Bobby Rush being the Minister of Defense of the Black Panther Party. Bobby Rush stood in front of the door of that apartment and told the whole world on December 4th, we lay this murder on the footsteps or at the feet of J. Hu Edgar, of course, J. Edgar Hoover. But the odyssey, so to speak, a very serious odyssey that Jeff and I and the Panthers and the survivors and families of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark and other community members went on for over 13 years to uncover the truth of who within that state and the details of who within that state were complicit in the murder and the cover-up. That's the story that we were able to unpeel and develop as the people's narrative over the next 13 years. And lo and behold, here we are again with another piece of that puzzle coming to light, as Jeff and I wrote about in Truth Out just this past month.
One thing.
Oh, sorry. I just want to ask real quick, how long was the total trial or trials? Because I know like 83 was that the end of the trials in 83, or how many years were you guys dealing with this?
Well, we were dealing with it from from the moment of the raid, December 4th, 1969, when Jeff went to the jail and I went to the apartment, and Jeff and others from our office, along with other lawyers in Chicago, defended the Panthers who were charged with attempted murder, even though they were the victims rather than the ones who were firing the shots. So in that sense, we started fighting that case the moment that Fred and Mark were murdered. We filed a lawsuit a few months later, a civil rights lawsuit, and that lasted for 13 years until 1983. The trial was 18 months, right in the middle of that, in 1976 and 1977.
Gotcha. Jesus. It's a long time. Pascal, I'm sorry.
One of the things that always fascinated me is that, as gentlemen, you guys were contemporary with Fred. What was it particularly about his activities in the Black Panther Party do you think that rose to such a level of consternation for the state attorney and eventually the FBI? Was it his organizing within the party and his service activities, his community service activities? Was it the cross-racial outreach of the nature of his working with different ethnic groups and trying to create some kind of cross-racial coalition? Was it simply the politics of the time? What were the constellation of stars, if you will, that coalesced to create this narrative on the minds of the state's attorneys that they realized, obviously this man was profoundly talented and very effective, but what if you had to say, what was the thing that you really saw as the main reason that they saw Fred as the one they want to get? What do you think it was?
Well, I would say his charisma, his organizing ability, his ability to inspire and motivate people. That wasn't separate from also the life he lived. He wasn't just an orator. If he said, show up at the breakfast program at 6 a.m, he would be there at 6 a.m. preparing the food or serving the food or talking to the parents. Same with selling newspapers. So he was the kind of leader that was both inspiring you to do the best you could. Also, he was politically very sophisticated, had read a lot, always said political education is a key part of everything we do. We don't separate our education program or our breakfast program from telling the community or making them understand this is what socialism, or this is what the government should be doing for you. And then there was this personal dynamic between he and the people around him. It was like a staccato back and forth where he would just energize people. Like you couldn't stand still if you were near Fred because he had so much energy. And I think even later on, as he maybe in some form sensed that the government, he said he stopped driving because the police would pull him over every time he drove a car. And I think that intensified as he said, I'm not going to die of a heart attack or slipping on a piece of ice. As he sensed time was closing in on him. One of the things he had said is he wanted to be a lawyer. And one of the things his parents gave me when I said, is there anything left from his room, was a book about Kunstler that he checked out of the library. But Fred said, I don't have time to be a lawyer. And there was also this, if you're not willing to make a commitment at the age of 20 because you're afraid to die, well, you're dead already. So he just took everybody where they're at, I think, appealed to their best, most revolutionary instincts and, made us want to live up to those.
And when you look at the reasons, as you asked, about why they targeted him, there's the heavy-handed, overreaching reasons that Hoover and Sullivan, his first underneath him for domestic intelligence, that kind of heavy-handed, racist, white supremacist attitude that they had about black liberation struggles in general, whether it be Dr. King, whether it be H. Rap Brown, Elijah Muhammad, Stokely Carmichael. Those were the people that they targeted and all the organizations that they represented and were leaders of. But they also were looking, and so when Fred Hampton came along, he fit into that category of a messiah.
The Black Messiah theory.
Right, a messiah who would unify and electrify the black masses. And also in that document, that COINTELPRO document, it talked about the unification. They feared the Rainbow Coalition. They feared the fact that blacks and whites and Latin folks and different organizations were all coming together, and that these messiahs, as they called them, could and were electrifying people across those movements to come together. They feared that greatly. So, on the one hand, it was they had an operation that was completely overreaching, that went from, the little old lady that handed out a leaflet to the most revolutionary of organizations. But they also feared most black liberation organizations, black liberation leaders, and they sensed, if not outright understood, that Fred Hampton was one of those leaders that was on the rise, not only in the Black Panther Party, but in Chicago and would be across the country.
Now, I was on a show earlier today, and we got into a discussion about something that's going on. And I don't know if you guys are hip to this, but recently there was a guy that's one of these Boogaloo boys, and he came out and said that he wants to, I guess, reach across the aisle and work with BLM, but they're like staunch libertarians and definitely lean very fascist. And and so there's been this talk that I don't agree with whatsoever, that Fred Hampton had worked with white nationalist organizations.
Well, he worked with the Young Patriots, who were basically young people who had come up from Appalachia, from West Virginia and Kentucky. And they were living in Uptown in Chicago. And they had really some of the same conditions that the black community had, really poor housing, police brutality, terrible schools, and so forth. And that group, at least initially, had Confederate flags on their mask, or wore Confederate flags on their hats and things like that. Somehow they were, whatever. Fred nevertheless worked with them, organized with them, but not around accepting white nationalism. When you hear they talk, they didn't say, well, our cause is the same as Fred's. They said, Fred's fighting police brutality. Fred's fighting for better housing for us. Fred's fighting for people in the community having power. And so we'll join that, not under the idea of being supremacist. Actually, the leader, one of the leaders of the Young Patriots, just did a recent thing. And he said on this podcast, he said, when Fred Hampton came to the Young Patriots, we said to him, what do you need from us, a white group that's powerless? Not like, and so, so I think they understood that they supported black liberation. They supported a egalitarian society and the opposite of a white supremacist. And he took maybe a couple of natural leaders who understood that, but they organized that community, or large numbers of that community.
It's very disingenuous to kind of tarnish that man's legacy with that rhetoric that, oh yeah, Fred Hampton worked with these white supremacist organizations too. Pascal and I were kind of talking about that earlier.
Right. Jeff, there's the movie and there's a remake of a movie. In fact, The Murder of Fred Hampton, which is where I think you got the film to start out, the piece, was made by the same filmmakers who made a year before a movie called American Revolution 2. And American Revolution 2 was about Bobby Lee, who was one of the main Panthers who worked the north side of Chicago, and who organized with and the Young Patriots. And it's all about that coalition. And in it, there is a flag, a Confederate flag, which makes us all cringe, no doubt. Yeah. But they were not about, as Jeff said, about white supremacy. They were about the same kinds of things in organizing that the Panthers were, and they were anti-racist. And that would, you had to be anti-racist for Fred to enter a coalition with you. He wasn't entering any coalitions with any white supremacist groups. So, and there was a remake of that movie, as Jeff mentioned, just that came out on PBS in the last year, and they went and talked to some of the leaders who are still alive. And one of the most moving parts of the movie is when one of the white leaders from the Young Patriots goes to the bedside of Bobby Lee, who's dying of cancer. And they talk as brothers about what they'd been through. And it shows also those leaders went on to be progressive leaders as we stand here, as they stood here today. So, yeah, I think it's completely opportunist for somebody to use that as an example. I mean, the Boogaloo Boys going to have to do some serious change in their politics history to align with black. That's my reaction to it. They certainly aren't in the same shoes as the Young Patriots.
It was very. I don't want to say the person's name who kind of hosted this Boogaloo Boy and gave him a platform. That dude's big enough. He doesn't need my help. But it was insulting. I watched a little bit of the interview, and it was extremely disingenuous because I kind of knew where people were trying to go with the whole spin on it. And I'm on this show earlier today, and that came up on the show, and we played this clip that I want to play now, and it's a clip of Fred Hampton being interviewed by I think a local affiliate of ABC News, and they're asking him about SDS and the Weathermen. And this guy is kind of trying to jab him to say something about the Weathermen and SDS. And you feel like the reporter wants him to say something probably a little more racial about these guys. And I love Hampton's answer. And also it taught me the term custoristic, which
we remember.
He said it's very custoristic, and I was like, man, so let me play this clip for you guys real quick.
Fred, where does the Black Panther Party stand concerning the Weathermen, the SDS?
We stand way back from the SDS and the Weathermen because we believe that the Weathermen action is two actions. It's RIM 2 and Weathermen. We think they call them both national action. We think that RIM 2 is national action, Weathermen is national reaction, We think it is anarchistic, opportunistic, individualistic, it's chauvinistic, it's custoristic, and that's the bad part about it. It's custoristic in that its leaders take people into situations where the people can be massacred, and they call that revolution. And it's nothing but child's play, it's folly, and it's criminal because people can be hurt. We say that they're doing exactly what the pigs want them to do. When they take people down and just do nothing, play around, and the pigs are prepared for this, and they'll wipe all of those young people out. We think these people may be sincere, but they're misguided, they're muddleheads, and they're scatterbrains. The only way we can show them is to criticize them like we're doing right now, and then leave from here and go to the federal building and have a demonstration that's to educate, a demonstration that is disciplined and organized, And that's what we're going to have to do, and let them see the examples.
Tell me why you feel the approach of the SDS Weatherman is wrong.
I feel it is wrong, just as I said before.
No, don't tell me just you said before. That's why I asked you again. Just answer straight.
That's the part that really pisses me off. When the guy's like, I don't want you to tell me what you said before. I want you to tell me what I want to hear, not what you said before. Do you guys remember when that was done?
They wanted that 10-second soundbite.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. They wanted him to say something. I feel like they wanted him to say something racial. And he wouldn't. And I love his critique of the Weathermen's strategy, or lack thereof, if you will. And what did you have to say about that, Pascal?
I thought it was a good clip, and I think it's just a demonstration how the media tried to goad him to create conflict with, those people, the weathermen and the SDS, who would normally be comrades and allies, and try to push him in a position where he would make them antagonists, and he was smart enough to not fall for the bait.
Yeah,
it was complex. They both, SDS and Panthers, had offices on Madison Street. The Panthers used the mimeograph machine that SDS had. In many ways, they did support the Panthers. And one of the COINTELPRO programs was an attempt to divide them. And what they did is they created these racist cartoons, and they attributed them to the Weathermen and to SDS. So they sent them to the Panthers saying, this is what SDS is about. So it wasn't an accident. We also ended up, because we were the People's Law Office, we represented both the RIM 2 marchers and the SDS people who got arrested in the Days of Rage. And I think that action, certainly might have been thought through better. I think the Weathermen were people who had gotten frustrated with the anti-war movement and its pacification, and felt like it had to amplify things. I think they felt if they became sort of another target in a sort of I don't know if armed struggle, that would alleviate some of the pressure on the Panthers somehow. I don't think it did. I don't think it increased the pressure on the Panthers, but I don't think themselves doing that decreased the pressure on the Panthers either. But anyway, there was this difference about that action. And in fact, Bill Ayers in his book writes, when we got, we called for a national action for thousands of people to run through the streets of Chicago. And when we got there, there were 150 of us and 1,500 cops. So we knew something was wrong.
and if I don't know if you guys want me to continue playing the clip, but the clip goes on, and again, the reporter keeps trying to get him to get, like you said, the 10-second soundbite, and Fred Hampton keeps on saying, I'm not going to risk the lives of people.
Good. Yeah.
Just to try to prove some sort of point, because these guys, and he's saying this in 68, these guys are armed to the teeth, and they have military style weapons that we don't have. So I'm sending out innocent people to the slaughter, and that's not revolution to me. And we were playing this clip earlier in the day on this other show that I was on, Left Flank Vets. Why am I not saying it? The Left Flank Vets, please check them out. They're amazing people. And juxtaposing it to that whole conversation of this guy supposed to be working with these right-wing movements, and why don't we align ourselves with these right-wing movements like it's some sort of class solidarity, when it has nothing to do with class solidarity at all.
I think in this same interview, Hy Fairman said, I thought he said so succinctly, he said, the problem with white people who's oppressed, when they look for support, they look up. They look to the white people who've succeeded, and that's where they want to be. They don't look for solidarity with Hispanic people and Black people and other people. And so our job was to bridge that gap, to avoid that. Our path is to join white supremacists and oppress other people. Mm-hmm. So they weren't unaware of that tendency. And he said that was probably the hardest thing we faced. But unlike the Boogaloo Boys or the 3%ers or whatever, they took that head on our class solidarity basis, and mm-hmm. not on a white supremacist basis.
Mm-hmm. Pascal?
No, I mean, I think that one of the things that's evident about the period of time is that political education was so important to all of these movement figures that, reading books and clarifying people's positions, having discussions, debates, and back and forth to clarify what exactly you stood on was such an important part of their day-to-day kind of movement activity that one wouldn't be allowed to obfuscate or be confused about what these types of cross-racial alliances were about. It would be made clear through the process of political education and clarification with the various participants as to what exactly they were engaging in, what were the goals and their agendas of their political actions on a very, very clear level. And I think that that's something that we have to realize in this time of where so much of politics is being transpired in digital platforms where there's no real meet space to meet individuals and press flesh, there's a certain aspect to the organizing that's going to be, bereft. It's going to be lacking because of that inability to really do that kind of close contact political education.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to, without that personal contact, and also without actually now, of course, even being out in the streets because of COVID, it certainly siloed people into, various things where they don't get exposed to other things. But yeah, that debate was certainly going on, and we didn't always, the left didn't, as you know, always join after having those debates. They continued in many ways. But yeah, Fred always pushed political education. And one of the things that, sometimes people ask, well, how could you identify O'Neill, as an informant? And, usually our idea of an informant was somebody who kind of stands there and doesn't say much and just takes in everything, not an active provocateur, But probably the one thing that did it was somewhat could have identified it, O'Neill, was his total lack of interest in politics, in coming to political education classes, in even engaging in that. He was a guy who had a car and on the street, and he was streetwise, and he could tell people how to do shit. But he never was interested in any of the political dialogue. Now, there are like that, but I think that was one of the things that could identify O'Neill in a lot of ways.
I think at this time we should really talk about the new evidence that you guys have brought about that demonstrates the role of the Hoover tenure at the Federal Bureau of Investigation and its connection to Fred Hampton's death. So you guys want to talk about what's the new documentation is that you've acquired?
Sure, I'll start out, and Jeff can back me up on it. We as I said, we knew, and Bobby Rush knew that the FBI had to be behind the raid, even though the front men were the state's attorney's office and his 14 Chicago police officers. And the FBI kept as a well-guarded secret the fact that O'Neill, the FBI informant provocateur, was in fact a mastermind in terms of the planning of the raid, in the sense that he drew up a floor plan to show his FBI control agent, Roy Mitchell, where Fred Hampton would be sleeping on the morning of December 4th when the raid happened. And that his control agent, Roy Mitchell, took that floor plan over to the state's attorney's office and the police, and that became the foundation for the murderous raid. But until the early 70s, we didn't know about O'Neill, we didn't know about the floor plan, and we didn't know about Mitchell. We started to slowly uncover the FBI's role in it, but we were never able to get to the point to get the documentation to show that Hoover and his first lieutenants, William Sullivan and George Moore, were involved in the details of knowing about the raid and being involved in encouraging and rewarding the main FBI actors, that being O'Neill and that being Mitchell, for their work in setting up the murder and assassination. So that information was kept all these years within the FBI until Aaron Leonard, a journalist and historian, asked for Roy Mitchell's personnel file. And after 5 years of waiting, this past December 4th, quite ironically, he got around two files, several hundred pages of documents. And within those files were documents that showed that Hoover and Sullivan and Moore were aware of O'Neill, were aware of his activities right before and right after the raid, and that they not only had sought a bonus for O'Neill for making the raid a success, which we did know about during the trial, but that they had rewarded Mitchell, the control agent, for O'Neill's work. And so we knew generally that FBI Washington had to have been through COINTELPRO involved, but we didn't have the specific documents that showed who, that being Hoover, that showed who, that being also Sullivan and Moore, were the ones who were closely monitoring what O'Neill and Mitchell were doing in Chicago, and were quite congratulatory when the raid was a, quote, success, end quote.
Yeah, I think some of the things about the new documents that came out 51 years later was, first of all, we never got them. And we spent years getting hundreds and thousands of pages and hundreds of volumes of discovery, and how many times they said we had everything and they told us everything. But here's something: Mitchell, who was a key witness, never admitted that he got a bonus. In this document, the head of the FBI in Chicago says he met with the informant O'Neill the day after the raid. We never knew that. This guy claimed that he was sort of learned of the raid passively. And it, as Flint said, it shows that Hoover and Sullivan and Moore, they started this chain. They started telling Mitchell on December 1st and 2nd, we want to reward you. We're really, the information you're getting from your informant is valuable to us. We want to encourage you to do this. It's almost unique. And so they started this chain about the time the floor plan was given to Hanrahan, and about the time that the raid was being set up, and they followed it all the way through. So that on December 10th, after the raid, they send this congratulatory letter and bonus to Mitchell on December 10th. And everybody in the chain of command signs off on it, Sullivan and Moore and Hoover. Yeah. And we had sought to go higher. We had sought to bring in Moore and Sullivan and Hoover. And the judge had prevented us, saying, you have no evidence of that. The judge continued arguing that COINTELPRO had nothing to do with this raid, even though we had a COINTELPRO document that said they had sent a hit letter to Jeff Fort telling him that the Panthers had a hit out on him. I know what I'd do if I were you. Mm-hmm. And you know, urging him to take retaliation, armed, retaliation. Even though the head of the FBI, when asked what a hit meant, he said, that's a nonviolent attack.
Wow.
That was what he testified to.
Wow. Somebody said that on the chat. I just got to put it up there. Wow.
Yeah.
Also, I went ahead and adjusted for inflation for the bonuses. And the $300 bonus in today's 2021 dollars would have been $2,115.62. The $300 bonus, and the $200 bonus would have been $1,462.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because maybe we should keep it at $300 because it really rhymes very well with 30 pieces of silver, which is, of course, what Judas got to trick on Jesus. And that to further talk about that, and we're going to see how this movie that's coming out in a week or two called Judas and the Black Messiah, which is about O'Neill and Fred, and it's made by Coogler, the producer who made the Black Panther movie.
Right.
We'll see how that plays. But O'Neill, the day he was getting the bonus, which was around the 9th or 10th of December, he was acting as one of the pallbearers in Fred Hampton's funeral.
Wow! Really?
Yes. So that really always, when we talk about it, we talk about the 30 pieces of silver, and we talk about the pallbearer, because that really, I mean, however they're going to play O'Neill in this movie, we have to remember really what he did. And we'll see how that all comes across.
That's my fear, and I don't know if you guys feel the same way. And then people that's watching the chat now, it's been pretty quiet because everybody's listening to you guys speak. So I appreciate you guys again coming on here, and thank you so much. My fear is that this movie, because the trailer I saw, and I was like, is this going to really be the human story of the snitch? Like, are we going to get this tale of like snitchy life and how hard he had it and how scared he was? And like, this is why the snitch snitched and did what he did, and how he's just lived his entire life with this anchor of shame hanging around his neck. Is that what this movie is going to be? Are you guys scared of that too?
I'm glad you raised that, because it isn't a personality issue between two people. O'Neill is a fascinating character, and everybody likes to play a villain, playing Iago versus Othello or playing that. But another story is how Mitchell played O'Neill and played on that, and how O'Neill looked up to Mitchell. And really the story is about the FBI who used O'Neill. In spite of his interest as a character, he is not an equivalent of Fred Hampton. And the struggle wasn't between O'Neill and Fred Hampton. It was between the FBI and Fred Hampton, and between Fred Hampton and all the powers that be. So I haven't seen the movie, but I think, I think that perspective is to approach it with that perspective makes a lot of sense.
And I think So, and I'm not saying that LeBron James is one of the producers. He's coming out on his production company, and I don't know how much say so he has with the sway of a film. And so far, Ryan Coogler, who's from not too far from where I am, actually went to school with my girl's sister next door, high school. I enjoyed Fruitvale Station. I rather enjoyed the Black Panther movies for what they are, superhero films. The Creed, I thought he did a great job with that. That being said, he is good at humanizing people that sometimes get looked at as villains. And is he going to be a little tone deaf to what he's doing because of that? Because LeBron did that movie Bombshell, which really painted Fox News female anchors in such an angelic light that it was really hard to watch.
Well, he's got some great actors playing both Fred and O'Neill. So I don't know how that's going to cut, but I did see an interview with Shaka King. And he said they kind of formed the movie on the model of The Departed, Departed has the FBI and as the bad guys. I'm trying to, but they also had a snitch, right? I mean, isn't a snitch integral to the story? And so that made me wonder, now that they're playing these two things off, how much it's going to focus on the FBI and how much it's going to be an O'Neill versus, protagonist, antagonist type of deal with Fred and O'Neill, because that's a popular way to put it. It's an easy way to tell a story that gets part of the story.
The Departed actually is a remake of a Chinese film called Internal Affairs, by the way.
Well, I think you're going to have to do a film review of this pretty quickly after it comes out next month.
Well, someone's saying they would like to hear a post-film analysis with all of you, and I'm going to put this out here. And I know I'm already bothering you guys. You didn't know who the hell I was from Adam hitting you up with an email a few days ago. I'm down if Pascal's down. Apparently, this is coming on HBO. I'll go get the HBO app. And we'll stream ourselves watching it on Twitch, because they won't pull our asses down for watching it. Everybody else will pull my happy black ass down for streaming that content. But we could watch the thing on Twitch if you guys want. We'll mail you some popcorn, and we can all have popcorn and watch it. And because you guys were there, and you guys would be like, "That's not how we talk. That's bullshit."
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I do know and that is that Conspiracy 7 movie was complete. Not only did it play all of the characters that we knew, from Kunstler to Abby Hoffman to Rubin to all those people, and as caricatures of really their politics and their commitment, but it played Fred Hampton as a total almost fantasy of who he was, in order to using it as a technique to get the murder of Fred Hampton in for a moment. I don't know if you guys saw that movie, but
I was afraid to watch it because I heard some similar analysis of the whole thing. So I'm not gonna lie, I was afraid to watch it.
I mean, I think you're right, Flynn. I hadn't thought of it quite that way, but they have Fred Hampton in the courtroom telling Bobby Seale what to say. In fact, Hampton was outside telling the world that Bobby Seale had been bound and gagged. And in fact, that was a huge role, and that became, the sketch of Bobby Seale bound and gagged was such a slavery that it went, and Fred actually brought that live. But the fact that he would have been in the courtroom doing that, I think you're right, Flynn. It attempted to bring a Fred Hampton in a role that neither he nor anyone else played in that sense.
Right.
I think it'll be interesting. I don't want to condemn or I don't want to praise the film at this point. I think it will bring a lot of interest to who Fred Hampton was and a lot of curiosity. And maybe it's our job then to tell the truth or to tell what happened or to use the good parts of it and criticize the parts that we don't agree with.
Well, if I can get you brothers to do that, like I said, I will get the app. I guess this is coming on HBO Go, and we will have to do it on Twitch because that's the only place where we'll be able to stream it. And I'll even talk to the Left Flank Vets if we could do like a group stream thing and have us and like 700 people watch it and hear you guys yell out bullshit.
This is after February 12th or something, right?
Does anyone know when that movie's coming out on the chat?
That's when it's coming out. I don't want to be the one before it comes out to tell people what to think about it, particularly, and have to do it on the spot. I think. Anyway, I personally, I'd like to, see it in whatever.
I feel the same way because, there's a balancing to all of it, of course, because we on the left like when there's stories that are underreported or not reported and leaders and figures that we love and respect who aren't known to the public. I mean, on the one hand, you want to see them become known, and you want it to be more commonly known. On the other hand, if you lived through it and you knew the people, you can very definitely see faults and misstatements and misrepresentations. And the question becomes, do you throw out the baby with the bathwater?
Right.
With the Hampton, what do you call it, kind of vignette in the conspiracy movie, it was all false in order to get one good thing to the public, which was Fred Hampton was murdered on December 4th, and they showed that. And then they went on to have Kunstler telling Bobby Seale about it, when in fact Bobby had been dragged out, bound and gagged a month before and wasn't anywhere near the trial in November. So every fact, qua fact, except that Fred was murdered on December 4th, was not true. So the question becomes, is the fact that Fred Hampton's murder was brought to the screen worth all the misrepresentations that went before and after? And I guess that'll be some of the questions that Jeff and I will be thinking about when we watch this movie. And my sense is there's going to be much more content to it than that Conspiracy 7 movie had.
Yeah.
I'm a little. The first critique I read was from a organization called the Black Socialists of America, or in America, and they were like, "Is this going to perpetuate the Black Messiah theory that even the FBI had? Are they going to make Fred Hampton out to be what did you say, Pascal? What was your critique?
The Black Messiah. That's why I said that.
No, you said something more than that. God damn it.
I don't remember.
Well, yeah, and of course it's important to remember that the whole black movement was a target of the FBI.
It had been for quite a while.
And had been. And we saw, if you saw FBI MLK, you'll see how devious Sullivan was in following and recording and trying to get Dr. King's illicit affairs on, and blackmailing him. And really more than killing him, I think he wanted to defame him. He wanted to take away his moral power by showing that he was human or whatever. And so he was not just combating a movement, but he was trying to destroy a movement. And, it wasn't just, I just learned something, we'll put it out there. He worked on that. And that's sort of the point of that movie, I think.
Do you guys think if you would have had social media back in those days, things would have been a little different when it comes to organizing? Or do you think it would have hurt your movement when it comes to organizing?
Well, of course, social media without COVID. Wasn't COVID are pretty deadly because you can't have a rally and it's very hard on virtually to kind of speak the way you do to an audience, and because you don't get that feedback. I think it works both ways. I think certainly some people feel like, well, because I've watched enough and listened to enough and put out enough on my social media, that's enough to me to do. I don't need to do anything more. On the other hand, it has really brought consciousness to a lot of people of what is going on. So you can't ignore it. And on the other hand, you can probably say it has some destructive aspects to it too. Of course, we've seen how Facebook and other groups have, provided a platform for right-wingers to organize and create, really organized right-wing stuff. I don't know how you all feel about it. I don't know if there's a simple answer to it.
I used to be more optimistic about it, but I've become a little more circumspect as I've seen the manifestations that have been brought about and how it's easily used to manipulate consciousness. Bring forth, broad-ranging conspiracy theories and just create all kinds of questionable movements as well. It's a social challenge, social and political challenge of significant import that I think that we're still working through as a society.
Yes, it certainly has aided the right and the white supremacists, because I was involved as one of the lawyers in the case representing the families of the 5 anti-Klan demonstrators that were murdered in Greensboro in 1979.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and we tried the civil case back in 1985, and the evidence there was a very big upsurge in North Carolina and in parts of the South where the Klan and the Nazis and several other right-wing supremacist organizations were forming coalitions. And I thought back on it when, in light of Charlottesville, and even more so in light of what happened at the Capitol, and thought, well, if back in the days of Greensboro, if they had social media, how would have they built that coalition of white supremacists that was more of a local phenomenon that led to the massacre in Greensboro? And how much stronger that would have been if they had the kind of ability to spread their lies and racism on mass media in the sense of social media.
Yeah.
And there's the other issue, of course, is in terms of surveillance in the FBI, social media can be very damaging. And people, it's a hard line to walk between trying to tell people and organize people and then knowing that everything you say and do on social media can be used against you. We saw this when I was up at Standing Rock, that some people took videos of actions that they were in or that other people were doing, not the way the right wing would, but just to show general pan shots. But then if people got arrested, here's me locking down to a bulldozer, or here's me so-and-so. And so those things, of course, can be used, turned out to be evidence against you at trial. So, there's that aspect to the social media too.
So Patricia Moody Jefferson just commented, my Bennett sister Sandy was murdered in the Greensboro massacre. I'm very sorry to hear about that. That was a horrible thing to actually get captured on video. Speaking of getting captured on video, that whole melee is actually on tape.
Right. The police were absent, even though the leader of the caravan into Greensboro was an FBI and police informant, Eddie Dawson. It took 40 years in Greensboro, but the struggle for truth and justice down there just got the city of Greensboro to make an official apology for the police's role and set up scholarships in the name of the 5 murdered anti-Klan demonstrators, including, of course, Sandy Smith. So each year in Greensboro, there'll be a scholarship given to 5 students of color who, in the name of the 5 men and women who were slaughtered by the Klansmen and Nazis who rolled into Greensboro.
One of the things that I mentioned to Flint was, we did get a large settlement for the families of Mark Clark and Fred Hampton and the survivors, even though Iberia, Fred's mother's final comment to me was they got away with murder.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike what Flint said at Greensboro, and unlike what was done with Birds, there's been no reparations. There's been no apology by the city of Chicago. There's been no recognition that the city was responsible for his death, that the chief prosecutor was the one who and the police who carried out the raid and covered it up. It's not taught in the schools the way now Burge is. So there's still some unfinished business, I think, around the story of Fred Hampton.
I agree. Is there anything else you guys want to say? We've gone a little over an hour. I know it's late where y'all are. Is there any I put links to your books and the article in the comments of all the platforms this is on. Is there any places you guys are going to be? Any more podcasts you're going to be on?
Well, we'll see.
Democracy Now, but we're not going to give you a date because we're not sure of the date and time. But if you'd like to know, we can certainly inform you.
Let me know. You got my email now, and if you are on Democracy Now.
Okay, we don't know for sure, but
if you get on there, can you just tell Amy Goodman and Juan I said what's up?
I certainly will.
Yeah.
I really thank you for having us on your show.
No problem. This was very, very informative.
And also for the comments that people have made in the chat. I really appreciate that. And maybe we'll do another show after the movie comes out, so that it'd be good if everybody's seen it. I don't, you don't want to be the one, well, you haven't seen it yet, this is what you should think, and this is what's wrong with it, or this is what's right with it. It seems to me it'd be a great discussion to have after people have seen it, and then it's not just us telling what we think it's going to be or what they should think.
Yeah, I want to hear what the Panthers here in Chicago. There's a great group of Panthers, and they don't consider themselves former Panthers, and they get together. And Jeff and I are honored to get together with them every December 4th. And with the part of our continuing ability to articulate about Fred comes from the fact that when we get together with them, they tell stories about how they were brought into the movement as a 17-year-old or as a 20-year-old. And so many of them have gone on to be doctors and lawyers and judges. I mean, these were some real people, these were some serious, smart, dedicated people. And that they will have opinions as well. But of course, Jeff and I do not want to in any way alienate Kugler.
Yeah, right.
Look, I can't stress it enough. If I can get enough of y'all watching to send tweets, send messages out, if I get 50 retweets of this show, I'm going to harass these dudes to watch this movie with us. We'll all watch it. We'll stream the movie after the 12th. We'll let it sink in for a minute, and we'll stream the movie together as a whole. And it'd be real dope if we could do it with some of the Panthers as well, and we could have everybody watching it and chiming in and yelling out. Jason, pause this right now because I want to yell out some bullshit that just happened. That would be my dream come true. So.
All right. Well, we'll
make that happen. We got to force these guys. We got to push them so they go, okay.
All right.
All right. Well,
All right, gentlemen. Nice talking to you.
Wonderful.
yeah, great talking to you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening. Thank you again.
All right. Take care.
Peace. Oops. That was Flint Taylor and Jeff Haas, Fred Hampton's lawyers. They have a new piece out in Truth Out. There's links in everywhere you're watching this live stream. I put links in the chat. I'll put links on the Facebook page and on Twitter as well. I'll share it out on there. I'll also share out where you can get those guys' books. I think Flint has the newer book that came out in 2019. I did not know that the snitch was a freaking pallbearer, dude.
A lot of deep information was shared here tonight, brother.
Oh my God. Like, how do you live with yourself? Oh,
This was one for the ages right here.
all right. Well, thank you guys very much. I'm going to leave you all with a clip of Fred Hampton right here talking about why he's not down with the tactics of the weathermen.
In case we use this part,
Feel that's
let me
wrong.
ask you again. Why do you feel that the approach of the SDS weatherman is the wrong approach?
I feel that it's wrong because it's pig action. You see, they're doing exactly what the pigs want them to do. They're leading people into a situation where it's an astronomical situation, too great for the people to deal with. It's a situation where you got a bunch of mechanical pigs with 357 Magnums and shotguns and mechanical mace and all that type of thing. And then they're talking about they're going to carry on a revolutionary struggle. That's not revolution, it's insanity, it's madness, it's nostalgia, and it's a massacre. That's what it's potential massacre, that's what it is. And we don't support that because we've said all power to the people. All the power is manifested in the people. We don't have any people whose lives we believe that should be thrown away.
Has the weatherman SDS tried to get you to go on their side? Have you met with them, and what happened?
We met with the weatherman faction of SDS several times. We've had ideological struggles and we have ideological differences. So what we did was we had the other faction of SDS that agreed with the Black Panther Party called for an alternate action, a well-disciplined action not to provoke pigs, an action not to talk about setting up confrontations with the pigs because the people are not ready for confrontation. These confrontations that they have are premature. They're politically premature and they're wrong because they commit people in a situation which they're not anywhere prepared for.
Well, why do you think the weatherman SDS tried to link the Black Panther Party to its movement?
I don't know if it was actually the weathermen of SDS. I'd have to say that it was the establishment press that is nothing but a tool of Warden Nixon's machine. We call him Warden Nixon because the whole world is a penitentiary and he's just a warden of the whole world. And you see, these people are just an arm that he uses for fascist oppression, you know. And I think today these fascist news media might have did that.